An integrative look at criminal behavior. The Integrated Project for M 2018 Psychology SL by Zoe Kerr. So what is criminal behavior? The origins of criminal behavior are very complex. Early theorists believed that there were criminal types. They came from certain ethnic groups and had certain physical characteristics, such as strong jawline, high cheekbones, large ears, and extra fingers or toes, as demonstrated in the diagram below. Psychologists recognize that the origins of criminal behavior are complex, resulting from a combination of risk factors. Among these risk factors are both biological and environmental factors, which interact and aggravate one another. The more of these risk factors that are present, the more likely the individual is to engage in criminal behavior. In this section, we are going to examine the nature of criminal behavior from three levels of analysis: the biological level of analysis, the cognitive level of analysis, and the sociocultural level of analysis. So are some people born criminals? The biological level of analysis argues that no one is born a criminal, but various biological factors can contribute to the criminality of criminals. Researchers will argue that no one is born to be a criminal. There are several theories regarding the biological nature of criminality. These include genetics, brain abnormalities, and neurochemical imbalances. The argument that criminality runs in families does not mean that it is biological. In order to determine the extent to which genetics may play a role in criminal activity, psychologists have carried out twin studies. Christiansen, 1977, studied almost 4,000 sets of Danish twins. He found a concordance rate of 35% in male twins and 13% in dizygotic male twins, which means that they were not identical. The rate among female twins was significantly lower, with 21% and 8%. Studies like this indicate that there may be some genetic factors in criminal behavior, but since the concordance rates are so low, it appears that other factors may play a more important role. There are limitations to these studies, and so further research on the genetic basis of criminality was carried out through adoption studies by Hutchins and Mednick, 1975. They thought that if both the biological adoptive fathers had criminal records, the children would have more of a higher chance of being criminals, and they found that 36% of sons also had a criminal record if both their adoptive parent and real parent had criminal records. If only the biological father had a criminal record, it dropped to 21%, and if only the adoptive father had a criminal record, it fell to 11%. When neither father had a record, 10.5% of sons had one. This study shows the importance of environmental factors. Brain research has looked primarily at the interrelationship between emotions and decision-making. Emotions are controlled by the limbic system in the brain, and decision-making takes place in the frontal lobe. Blair et al. 1999 looked at the brains of convicted psychopaths using PET scans, revealing impairment of the pathways between the amygdala, which is responsible for emotional responses, and the frontal lobe. Blair argues that this impairment makes it difficult for the individual to control his or her emotional reactions. The theory that a malfunctioning relationship between the frontal cortex and limbic system is called frontal brain hypothesis. Antonio Damasio looked at the effect of brain trauma in children on their later development. In his study, he found that a boy who had a brain tumor removed did have behavioral problems later on. Such case studies lend support to the frontal brain hypothesis by showing a relationship between brain damage and antisocial behavior. Other biological research has focused on the role of neurotransmitters and hormones on criminal behavior. In 2004, the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation reports 82% of those arrested for violent crime are males, and 90% of apprehended murderers were male. Low levels of neurotransmitter serotonin have been linked to this antisocial and impulsive behavior. Interestingly, men, who are responsible for the vast majority of crimes committed, generally have lower levels of serotonin. James Dabb has demonstrated that violent criminals have higher testosterone levels than non-aggressive criminals as well. Once again, there are correlational studies, and they do not establish cause and effect. Psychologists are also unsure of whether these chemical imbalances are genetic or the result of environmental factors. How do criminals think? Psychologists of the cognitive level of analysis have looked at how criminals think. They have argued that criminal behavior is a result of cognitive distortions, which are errors in thinking. So, examples of cognitive distortion are blaming others for your own failures, super optimism, extremely wishful or magical thinking, I think, therefore it is, which is not being able to accept mistakes in the face of incontrovertible evidence, minimizing to reduce or limit the true significance of a behavior, and build up, which is exaggeration of compliments and abilities to make ourselves look better. Yokchelson and Samnow, 1976, looked at how criminals thought. Their research has sparked interest in the role of cognition in criminal behavior, but their own research is rather limited. They only studied convicted criminals and they did not look at the role these cognitive distortions play in the non-criminal population. Rational choice theory. Cornish and Clark, 1987, have proposed the rational choice theory. They argue that criminal behavior is the outcome of a reasoned decision-making process. The theory is based on the assumption that criminals seek to benefit from the crimes they commit. Bennett and Wright, 1984, interviewed convicted burglars and asked them which factors would most influence their decision to rob a home. They found three factors that influenced the decision the most. Risk, which is the chance of getting caught, financial reward, and ease of entry. Researchers argue that violent crimes are not rational but are impulsive. Though the study seems to support the theory that there is clear decision-making processes, one does have to question the research since it is based on unsuccessful burglars. How does society and culture affect our behavior? The sociocultural level of analysis considers how the society and culture we belong to affect our behavior. Factors influencing our behavior and interaction. There are two factors that affect our behavior at this level of analysis: the social/cultural expectations people have of us, and the economic and political realities that exist where we live. An example of these factors would be poverty. The question of the role of poverty on criminal behavior is rather complex. Many people would automatically assume that those who earn less money would be more likely to commit crimes. However, the research has been somewhat inconclusive on this point. Mester, 1988, has recommended that instead of focusing on differences in income, we need to look at structural poverty. Structural poverty means single-parent families, low education levels, high infant mortality rates, and low social mobility, which means a lower chance of improving your social situation. Mester found a much higher correlation between structural poverty and crime rates than between income levels and crime. Another social factor that could influence criminality is unemployment. Many studies have clearly indicated a correlation between rates of unemployment and crime. However, this data is often misinterpreted as simply the result of loss of income. Unemployment, like poverty, is very complex. Unemployment can damage an individual's self-esteem and can provoke the feeling that life is meaningless or even evoke suicide. Another theory is that these social factors may interact with biological factors and lead to criminal behavior. Theory that social factors interact with biological factors. An example of this is a mother who is pregnant with a fetus who is homeless and is undergoing a huge amount of stress which could possibly affect the fetus. possibly affecting the way that the fetus's brain develops and could possibly cause criminal behavior later on. However, more research is needed to determine the extent of the effect that these social factors have on biological factors. As the application part of this project, I wanted to include a not so fun fact. And so the homicidal triad slash McDonald triad is this theory that profilers and criminologists use to identify and characterize different behaviors associated to murderers. And so the three behavioral signs that a person could be a homicidal murderer is bedwetting, fire setting, and torturing and or killing animals. And so I wanted to identify this specific theory because it could be used as an application towards helping young children or young offenders be reformed or even prevented. And so by monitoring the behavior and knowing the signs, like the homicidal triad, it is possible to reduce and even prevent young offenders from even committing a crime in the first place. And so using different behavioral aspects can actually prevent the whole situation. And so that concludes my integrated project, M 2018 Psychology SL. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and thank you very much for this entire semester and everything that I've learned. Can't wait to learn more next semester.